welcome to Best Laid Plans. This is your host, Sarah Hart-Unger, and this is the podcast where we talk all things planning and planning adjacent. And today we're going to talk about dealing with disappointment when your best laid plans fall through. And as usual, I am doing this through a very personal lens. This is an episode that will be about my best laid plans falling through and how I am dealing with that. And it's funny, like the title of this show, Best Laid Plans, obviously it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek because the phrase best laid plans people love to use when things don't actually work out according to plan. And then here I am, I've appropriated the term for my podcast all about planning and setting things up all perfectly. But the truth is, not everything you plan is going to happen. And I'm going to tell a story about that with my own life. But first, a little bit of background. So as I'm recording this, it's almost July. You guys are hearing this in early July. I guess if the plans of this week had gone according to plan, I would have just got back from Philadelphia where I was going to visit my parents. And I was especially happy about that because there's been what I would call a parade of calamities in our family. So as I talked about on the show, my mother-in-law passed away at the end of April. Then there were some very, very minor things in comparison. Like I had to deal with a basal cell carcinoma on my head. Totally not a big deal, but annoying, right? I get shocked erroneously by my defibrillator. Not a big deal, but not fun in the moment. Then my dad has a hip replacement and he's not recovering well and ends up fracturing his femur badly, doing nothing, just rolling over in bed. And I think I talked about how I went up to Philadelphia to visit him and help them deal with the situation. And that's still unfolding and very stressful. And that's happening. And then I start my call week and it is an epic call week. And I wrote a blog post where I talked about how I was proud of myself because the universe was just handing me challenges and I was rising to the occasion by staying calm. I mean, I kid you not, one morning I get there and one of our diabetes educators, we have this amazing team, and she's like, "Did you know there's 3 new patients in the ICU?" And I'm like, "Actually, no. I thought there was 1 and I was already busy today and you're telling me there's 3, but I stayed calm. Like it was cool. We dealt with it. At the end of the day, we gave each other high fives because we made the day work one step at a time, right? And there were some rough nights. I think the first night I got to sleep through on Monday night, but on Tuesday night, I was up like all night. So I was very tired. And then on Wednesday evening, the kids were home, everything was done. And my husband went to try out for a community basketball league. And I was like, bye. I didn't think anything of it until I got a phone call at 9 p.m. And he's like, "I broke my leg. I'm sorry. Don't kill me," or something like that. I almost couldn't process what he said to me. The truth is, this happened at least once before. So 14 years ago, he went on a ski trip for a surgical conference. And I was very pregnant with my first child, with Annabelle, about 30 weeks. And as he left on that trip, I said, "Please don't break your leg. Like, don't do it." And then he called me one afternoon and I was in clinic and I said, "You broke your leg, didn't you?" And he's like, "Yes." And he had a tib-fib fracture that needed surgery. And I flew up to Vail, very pregnant. It was a lot. So to get this phone call approximately 14 years later that was like, "I broke my leg." I mean, I was like, is this a joke? But then I quickly realized it was definitely not a joke. He was in a ton of pain. And I ended up meeting him. I was worried I wouldn't get there before the ambulance. So I ended up meeting him at the hospital. And he broke it really badly, you guys. Like, there's broken legs and then there's like tibial plateau fractures with joint involvement. And he had that. So yeah, it was like a basketball injury, but all the doctors kept saying it looked more like a motorcycle crash. Like, this is crazy. So in an instant, I thought, wow, my poor husband, I think he's going to be okay, but wow. And wow, our poor summer. And I looked at my 14-year-old and was like, I don't think we're going to Hawaii. So, I mean, obviously I cared the most for my husband's welfare. It's just that I felt like, okay, it's a fracture. He's going to be okay. And I instantly was like, oh my gosh, all of our visions for our family fun, for something that I had been looking forward to the point of having like a countdown after all that other stress that had happened and disappointment. Yeah, it was a lot. It was a lot. I mean, a lot kind of felt like it was in front of me at that moment. The loss of our plans, but also like the concern about him, of course, about him regaining function ultimately, about how would the kids do with basically one parent doing everything, and what's this going to mean for our future, and just so much uncertainty. And I definitely had a little bit of just fixation on the loss of that trip, even though, again, small in the grand scheme of things, but had just meant so much to me being on the horizon. And a backstory for the trip is that it was a 20th anniversary trip. And I had this on my 5-year travel plan for years. I always thought, what ages would be okay to fly all the way to Hawaii? And I had decided, it's 8, 12, and 14. Like I didn't want to deal with a 5 or 6-year-old with that long of a flight, but I felt like 8, 12, and 14 sounded good. And for a long time, 8, 12, and 14 were really, really far in the future until they weren't. And so we booked the trip for this summer. And I meticulously planned this trip. I think I talked about planning a lot of it with my daughter, which was actually a ton of fun as well. She and I looked at reviews and she made a Canva slideshow and we booked all these excursions and the hotels and everything was saved into a file in Apple Notes. And I had even written all of those things in my planner, including restaurant reservations, our canoe tour, our Napoli coast boat tour in Kauai, like all these amazing things. And I felt like I was like living that vacation in my mind a little bit before we even left. So yeah, then all of a sudden we realized this cannot happen. It certainly can't happen in the way that we envisioned it. And after some analysis, calmly, we realized that it made more sense to table the trip, to have the trip that we truly dreamed of rather than try to fly, even though, the doctors actually said, don't do it. So we would have been like, we weren't going to do what they said not to do. And he would have been uncomfortable and we wouldn't have got to do any of the things we wanted to do. So we decided to postpone it. And I'm going to talk about all the aftermath in a moment. But I will say that all of my planning and writing things down and keeping my Apple Notes doc was actually quite helpful when I went to cancel everything, because it was just very easy to find the names of everything we booked and to make sure I checked off everything. And luckily, I did book pretty much everything refundable. Actually, if he had broken his leg, I think a week later, we would have been out a lot of money from one of the hotels, but it was within the cancellation period. So at the end of the day, I got all my points, miles, and dollars and credits back. So other than the fact that we will have to use Alaska Airlines for something in the next year or so, I feel really, really lucky there and just glad that my organization made it easy to find everything to go ahead and cancel. All right, we're going to take a break and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've re-envisioned the summer, my mindset right now, and just thoughts on when you have to pivot and deal with a change. Today's episode is brought to you with support from IXL, a learning platform that helps support kids in all settings, including homeschool. With schedules that vary, you need summer learning tools that meet you where you are, and you want to ensure that you have ways to keep kids confident with the skills they have before the next school year begins. IXL helps homeschool families maintain steady progress without feeling rigid or overwhelming, and we've used it in our house for years during the summer to keep skills fresh for the next academic level. Everything is organized by grade and subject, so you can quickly find what each child needs without juggling multiple resources. And it's really designed well to keep kids engaged, with celebrations, awards, and visible progress markers. I know my 8-year-old is excited to use IXL this summer to ensure she's fully ready for 3rd grade. Make an impact on your child's learning. Get IXL now. And Best Laid Plans listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/plans. Visit IXL.com/plans to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price. Today's episode is brought to you with support from Green Chef. In my opinion, the best nutrition strategy is to make the healthy options easy. It's one thing to have elaborate plans to follow health trends, but it's another thing entirely to have healthy food on hand, ready to go, that already meets your nutritional goals. Green Chef is a fantastic way to make your healthy lifestyle easy. With Green Chef, every week you get over 40 recipes made with organic produce, responsibly sourced proteins, and no ingredients you can't pronounce. They have meals that come pre-portioned and are ready in minutes. And if you want extra nutrition guidance, they include free, unlimited one-on-one coaching that helps you stay on track. Green Chef is also the only certified clean meal kit, as tested by the Clean Label Project, and the most sustainable meal kit, with 20% less food waste and 100% offset delivery emissions. I love it when we have a Green Chef week at our house. It means that healthy and delicious meals are just ready to go. No additional mental load required. Head to greenchef.com/50bestlaid and use code 50BEST-LAID to get 50% off your first month, then 20% off for 2 months. That's code 50BEST-LAID at greenchef.com/50BEST-LAID.
This episode is brought to you by Accenture. When your advertising operations fall out of sync, everything else follows. Spotify and Accenture are working together to reinvent the rhythm of ad sales, using automation, analytics, and smarter workflows to simplify campaign delivery and access better data across the business. The result? Less time spent on operations, more time connecting brands with the moments and fandoms that matter most. Learn more at accenture.com/Spotify.
All right, I am back, and we are talking all about dealing with plans that didn't come to fruition when your best laid plans fall through. And I will first say that the first few days, I didn't do a lot of this calm, measured, positive discussion. I just wallowed. And I don't mean that I yelled at my husband. Of course not. I was taking care of him. I made sure that he knew that I did not in any way blame him for this. I felt so bad for him. I mean, honestly, the repercussions of this might be pretty not great long-term from an athletic perspective. So he's got his own things that he's dealing with, and that's a lot. So none of this was targeted in that way, but I was just sad. I mean, I was doing what I did to take care of him. And finishing my call week, by the way, that was a little bit stressful. I had one colleague cover me for a night, and then thankfully I was able to trade the weekend, but there was no one available to cover some of it. So I was super, super stressed out. And so I was sort of in survival mode. And any moment that I had to think, I was just spiraling, but then also just sad and venting to friends, etc. So not going to lie, I had my wallowing phase and I needed it. And that lasted about 4 days, I guess. So this happened on Wednesday night. Thursday and Friday was survival mode with call. Then the weekend was, I would say, continued wallowing. But I decided that on Monday morning, I was going to wake up and try to go through my routines. Now, he's needed some care overnight, some help with wrapping dressings and pain meds and stuff like that. So I told myself if I was up all night, I wouldn't get up early. But if I got to mostly sleep, then I would go ahead and get up early and try to do at least an abbreviated version of my routine. And it turns out he was able to do most of his stuff independently the night before. So I got up and I did my planning and I started the day more like normal, which I hadn't done for several days. And I journaled and I started to think a little bit more positively about how this is not the summer we planned. Of course, it doesn't mean that every day is going to be misery. And a lot of this suffering is about the gap between expectations and reality. But now I know my expectations are different and I can begin to adjust so that I can still enjoy the everyday and what we do have going on. And I thought concretely about the things that still will be okay this summer. I can still read. Summer reading can absolutely still happen. Nothing will stop me from reading. Maybe I'll even read more because we'd be home and not going anywhere. I feel like I can get a free pass about some of my summer goals, to be completely honest. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about goals you're creating for yourself. You only have to answer to yourself. So I'm going to look at those and then I'm probably going to say, you know what? July is going to be about getting through this, and then we'll think about moving forward with various projects and more goal-oriented productivity in the fall. That fits the fall better anyway. So yeah, I mean, I feel like I can give myself a free pass, so I guess that's good. My husband will be home more, so we'll get to spend more time together. Obviously not in the way that we wanted to, but still, it is more quality time. Other positives is that he's medically okay. This could have been so many worse things. I know personally people going through medical crises right now and who have in the past. And so at least this is something that you will heal from in some way, shape, or form. Generally not life-threatening. So that is fantastic. I'll have a lot of PTO to use next year. I am always really having to ration my paid leave time. Even though I work part-time, my PTO is scaled to part-time. So if we want to take time off for the holidays and we want to take time off for spring break, etc., I've told you about my PL planner. I have a spreadsheet and I really track the days, and sometimes I get a little bit down to the wire, but I'm going to be able to work a lot of these days that I would have been traveling, and that will give me a really nice buffer for next year so we can be more generous with ourselves when he is more mobile. So that's good. Another small win is that, this is silly, but as we were planning the trip, I really wished we had another day in Kauai, but I had already booked all the flights and hotels and everything. So now I can redo this and add another day in Kauai and actually make that happen. So that's good. And then finally, I was dreading starting call straight back from this trip, which is how the schedule was. So I can try to avoid that in the future. I do feel like a buffer between your 6-hour time difference trip and your call week would probably be a good idea. So those are the positive things that I've tried to focus on, and then just really trying to focus on what I'm doing, whether that is working out, listening to music and driving around to pick up bandages and ice, or it is eating dinner with the kids. It doesn't matter. These things still have bright spots. And if you're thinking on and focused on whatever it is you're doing, you're not at the same time going to be focused on what you're not doing. So for me, trying to grasp into a little bit more of that presence and avoid my natural tendency to fixate on the future, I think has been really healthy for me. This is why a lot of the mindfulness type stuff really resonates with me, like the work of Pema Chodron, which I actually was just finishing her recent book as this happened. So good timing there, but just focusing on the present so that I'm not thinking about an imagined future and the gap between what's actually happening. And then, of course, I did buy a new Hobonichi cousin, just the July to December edition. But you guys, I couldn't use those July weeks that had every single thing we had booked and my Philadelphia trip, and lots of things are going to look different. And so I just ordered from Jet Pens a fresh copy. I thought about switching planners altogether, which is my first time that I've had this impulse at all this year. I've even thought about a vertical Erin Condren. I looked at the Laurels at Nice. I looked at Sterling Ink. They do have a 6-month planner, but it was sold out. I love the Faded Chronicle layouts, but they don't have anything for 2026 anymore. So I just decided to replace my Hobonichi cousin Avec for the July to December edition, and we'll look forward to another bright spot of putting on some relaxing music and filling that out. So that is where we are. That is how I personally have dealt with some best laid plans that fell through. Again, I will acknowledge our fortune here that everyone's still in one piece. Bones are healing, put back together. So now back in one piece, and we all will recover from this, and truly nothing was lost, but definitely a lot to process. Yeah, I think especially about just a gap between what I thought the summer would be, especially this trip I had planned and fantasized about for such a long time, and what it is. But we can do hard things. We can come around and accept these things, and we can still enjoy life and move through each day and find things to appreciate. So that's where I am right now. I sound a million times more positive and grateful than I did 3 days ago, but hey, we evolve, I guess. And if something like this happens to you, I highly encourage you to wallow first and let yourself just live in it. Feel your feelings, cry if you need to, vent to friends, but eventually you're going to have to start your day and see what you can focus on that's now and see where you can rebuild. And I very much look forward to rebuilding our itinerary for next summer. All right. So this has been an interesting episode. Thank you so much for listening. I know these autobiographical episodes aren't entirely planning focused, but I did feel like I had to share with you. And these were best laid plans after all that did fall through, and how I'm handling them. By the way, if anybody's like, well, that's why I don't make plans, no regrets about making the plans. I'm going to make the plans again. Listen, even if only 50% of my Hawaii trips happen, that's a lot more Hawaii trips than would happen if I didn't make plans. So there you go. I'll be back next week in your feed with more planning fun. Thank you as always for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful week.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.